Hello, and welcome to Entangled, the podcast where we explore the science of consciousness, the true nature of reality, and what it means to be a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm your host, Jordan Youkilis, and in this episode, I share my capstone paper. I wrote this essay to complete my Master of Arts in Consciousness and Human Potential at Maharishi International University last month. This paper is titled as Consciousness, the Unified Field, Evidence for a New Paradigm of Reality. The capstone prompt was the application of Maharishi Vedic Science to solve a problem in society. The final research paper explores practical outcomes of Maharishi Vedic Science, how the principles brought out by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi can practically address current problems such as education, government, school violence, PTSD, striving from full human development, need for creativity, etc. In his Consciousness, the Unified Field, I propose that the Vedic concept of the field of pure consciousness and the self-interacting field of modern string theory are one and the same. I first described the history of our current paradigm of reality, one defined by materialism, reductionism, and determinism. I then highlight anomalous phenomena which do not fit the materialist paradigm, including the hard problem of consciousness, the paradoxes of quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement, the mystical experience, and higher states of consciousness. I then argued that consciousness is fundamental and that matter is the illusion. Next, I explain how these anomalous phenomena can be understood by a consciousness-based paradigm of reality as proposed by Maharishi Vedic Science. I conclude with thoughts on what this paradigm shift in our understanding of ultimate reality could mean for the future of humanity. If you enjoyed this episode and are interested in learning more about Maharishi Vedic Science, check out the rest of the mini-series in Entangled episodes 47 to 53 and 82. Music from the show is available on the Spotify playlist Entangled the Vibes. If you like the show, please drop a 5-star review and subscribe on Substack, Spotify, X, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To the faculty and staff of MIU, thank you for the education of a lifetime. To the 2025 MIU graduates, congratulations. You watered the root, time to enjoy the fruit. Please enjoy the episode. Is consciousness the unified field? Western society's current model of reality understands the world as fundamentally physical. Humans perceive the world through our 5 senses. As such, we tend to extrapolate that perspective to the entire universe. In doing so, we miss the opportunity to understand the reality that exists outside of our waking state's perception. We accept the idea that time and space exist as concrete concepts and that events are solely driven by cause and effect. In this model, we fail to consider that reality could be much more abstract and forget the ideas proposed by past civilizations. Before the scientific enlightenment, humanity accepted the idea that the planets, stars, and sun revolved around the Earth because, from our perspective, that truth appeared self-evident. When this theory was disproved, it catalyzed a renaissance in scientific thought and forced the prevailing religious doctrines to loosen their grip on society's understanding of the world. The paradigm of reality that developed post-Enlightenment is one characterized by materialism and reductionism. The fields of mathematics, physics, and human physiology helped to explain our world at deeper levels than most thought possible. Yet as those bodies of knowledge evolved, scientists discovered phenomena that they could not explain. For example, as quantum mechanics developed, physicists were left wondering, are subatomic elements waves or particles? If they are energetic waves, why do we perceive macroscopic objects as solid? If time and space are geometrically related and the speed of light acts as the upper limit for the frequency of energy, then how do we account for quantum entanglement, which proves particles are non-localized and can communicate instantaneously? Is there some field, some fundamental level of reality that transcends the laws of time, space, and causality? If so, what is the structure and function of this unified field of nature? Furthermore, while the refinement of science has enabled us to better understand the objective quantitative elements of reality, it has done little to help us make sense of the subjective qualitative aspects. Neuroscience has helped us to understand the functioning of the brain and the processes of stimulus and response, but it has not solved the explanatory gap. Why does our biochemistry result in a conscious experience of life at all? If we're simply biochemical robots, living a life predestined since the universe formed, then why are we conscious of existence? How do we interpret our thoughts, feelings, and emotions? Do we have free will to control our own fate? Finally, how do we account for experiences outside of waking state of reality? Why do we dream if those experiences are meaningless? How do we account for the reports of individuals who have experienced higher states of consciousness, individuals who claim to have connected to a field of divine thought, which transcends the laws of space, time, and causality? In this paper, I'll argue that the materialist paradigm is no longer the best model for our cosmos, and that humanity should move to one based in consciousness. This theory, which was brought to light by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi through the body of knowledge known as Maharishi Vedic Science, explains the gaps I highlighted in the materialist paradigm and more. When we consider that consciousness itself is the unified field, we can recognize that reality is far more abstract than the current paradigm allows. This reframing of reality can facilitate a paradigm shift in the development of scientific thought as significant as the one experienced during the Enlightenment. History of the materialist paradigm. The scientific consensus for our paradigm of reality has developed in the centuries since the Enlightenment. Our understanding underwent a paradigm shift in the 16th century as we moved from a geo or Earth-centric view of the solar system to a helio or sun-centric view. The Copernican revolution began in 1543 when astronomer Copernicus published De Revolutionibus. It gained support over the subsequent century with the help of Galileo in his study of the laws of motion and Kepler's theories on the geometrical harmonies of the planetary orbs. The Copernican revolution kicked off the Age of Enlightenment, and new discoveries continued. Collectively, these insights were built into a paradigm of reductionist materialism widely accepted today by the West. This paradigm accepted the scientific method, which requires direct observations and measurements to be made on the subject of study. In doing so, they restricted science to the physical world. Out of the scientific method developed Sir Isaac Newton's Newtonian physics. Based on his mathematics, Newton proposed a philosophy that viewed the universe as a machine. According to Dr. Bruce Lipton, this mechanistic version of reality came to incorporate three main tenets. First, materialism. Physical matter is the only fundamental reality. The universe can be understood through knowledge of its visible physical parts. Rather than invoking unseen vital forces or spirits, life is derived from self-reactive chemistry that comprises the body. Simply stated, all that matters is matter. Second, reductionism. No matter how complex something appears, it can always be dissected and understood by studying its individual components. Simply stated, to understand something, take it apart and study its pieces. Third, determinism. Occurrences in nature are causally determined, a consequence of the concept that every action produces a reaction. An outcome can be predicted by the linear progression of discrete events. Simply stated, we can predict and control the outcome of natural processes. In the 20th century, physicist Albert Einstein advanced the scientific paradigm when, through his theories of special and general relativity, he was able to geometrically account for the relationships between space and time. Einstein proposed that everything in the universe is relative to the status of the observer, and the existence of different worlds, forms, and phenomena can only be accounted for in terms of relativity. Einstein's general theory of relativity is a geometrical framework in which gravity is viewed as the curvature of space-time geometry, and where time and space are interwoven into a single continuum known as space-time. The perceived events are all relative to the speed and relative locations of the observer. However, Einstein also spent his life searching for a unified field theory, one ultimate basis of all creation. In this paper, I will provide evidence that consciousness is the unified field underlying all reality, and that a consciousness-based paradigm explains the anomalous phenomena observed which cannot be explained by the materialist reductionist paradigm. Anomalous phenomena. The materialist paradigm has left several anomalies unanswered, or at least insufficiently explained. These include the experience of consciousness, wave-particle duality, quantum entanglement, mystical experiences, and the experience of higher states of consciousness. Hard problem of consciousness. Are consciousness and matter, or mind and brain, interconnected? The 17th century philosopher René Descartes postulated that they are separate, and this hypothesis has been accepted by the current paradigm of science. This idea of Cartesian duality separated objective scientific materialism from the subjective realm of thought and spirituality, which has bred enormous misunderstanding. The scientific method has been able to explain easy problems of consciousness, such as the neural basis for mental functions like memory and forgetting. However, the existing paradigm has been unable to explain what Australian philosopher David Chalmers labeled the hard problem of consciousness, or the ability to explain why these neural processes result in subjective experience. This unexplained phenomenon is also referred to as the explanatory gap because it does not answer the question of how physical mechanisms of perception leap the chasm to become subjective experiences. In Galileo's Error, philosopher Philip Goff highlights how physics can explain behavior, but does not discuss the nature of the object. Similarly, physicist Stephen Hawking asked, "What is it that breathes fire into the equations and makes a universe for them to describe?" Paradoxes of quantum mechanics. The explanatory gap is just one of the anomalous phenomena unexplained by the current paradigm of reality. While Einstein was making sense of very large phenomena, other physicists of the 20th century were busy studying microscopic phenomena. Scientists like Werner Heisenberg, Erwin Schrödinger, and Niels Bohr worked together to develop the model of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is the fundamental theory that describes the behavior of nature at and below the atomic level and which serves as the foundation of quantum physics. They had discovered that at the subatomic level, reality functions far differently than at the level explained by Newtonian physics. Unexplained phenomena at the quantum level include the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, wave-particle duality, and the discontinuity of electrons, also known as the acausal gap. The uncertainty principle refers to the fact that one cannot specify two or more properties of a system if the corresponding quantum mechanical operators do not commute with one another. Particles are localized objects which can be described by physical properties like volume, density, and mass. Quantum entanglement. Furthermore, around the time of Einstein's discoveries of special and general relativity, quantum physicists discovered that some subatomic particles demonstrated identical polarization, or the spatial orientation of the photon's wave-like aspect as it travels away from its point of origin, no matter how far apart they were. The phenomenon of entanglement refers to a group of particles being generated, interacting, or sharing spatial proximity in such a way that the quantum state of each particle of the group cannot be described independently of the state of the others, including when the particles are separated by large distances. This includes position, momentum, spin, and polarization. Position is a mathematical identification of relative location. Momentum is the product of the mass and velocity of an object. And spin is an intrinsic form of angular momentum carried by elementary particles and thus by composite particles such as hadrons, atomic nuclei, and atoms. Einstein was troubled by these discoveries as it implied subatomic particles were interconnected in a way that he didn't understand. In 1935, Einstein and two colleagues published a paper in which they argued Niels Bohr's quantum mechanical findings on entanglement could not possibly be correct. Their argument was based on the idea that polarization would imply instantaneous communication between photons, a clear violation of Einstein's special theory of relativity, which states that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Bohr's response was simply that Einstein et al. Had based their argument in a fundamental error in considering the two photons as separate in the first place. Rather, they were part of one indivisible system, and it was meaningless to think of them otherwise. Mystical experiences. In addition to the explanatory gap and the paradoxes of quantum mechanics, the materialist paradigm fails to explain the quality of consciousness wherein people have reported higher states of consciousness, often colloquially known as spiritual or mystical experiences. Reports of these experiences can be found throughout different cultures, geographies, and time periods, as detailed by Dr. Craig Pearson in The Supreme Awakening and by William James in Varieties of Religious Experiences. These experiences have been occasioned spontaneously and with the assistance of psychedelic plant medicines. For example, in Roland Griffiths et al.'s 2006 study at Johns Hopkins, the researchers found that, quote, when administered under supportive conditions, psilocybin occasioned experiences similar to spontaneously occurring mystical experiences, end quote. 22 of the total 36 volunteers had a complete mystical experience after psilocybin, and 67% of the volunteers rated their experience with psilocybin as the single most meaningful experience or among the top 5 of their life. Higher states of consciousness. It's important to recognize that mystical experiences are different from the experience of pure consciousness and higher states of consciousness achievable through meditation. Mystical experiences involve an experiencer and are in a very overwhelming experience. The experience of pure consciousness, the individual experiencer has become the pure consciousness, like a wave becoming the ocean. This important distinction is supported by different brainwave patterns: gamma during psychedelic experiences and alpha during the experience of pure consciousness. Different blood flow patterns, decreased blood flow to all brain areas on psychedelics versus higher frontal and lower brainstem blood flow during the experience of pure consciousness, and default mode activity, which is reduced during psychedelics and high during the experience of pure consciousness. These gaps in the materialist paradigm, unified field theory, the explanatory gap, the paradoxes of quantum mechanics, and meditation experiences, including higher states of consciousness, indicate we may need another paradigm shift in our understanding of reality. As Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler took science from the geocentric to the heliocentric model of the solar system, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and other pioneers of consciousness-based science have paved the trail for a shift from a materialist reductionist paradigm of reality to a consciousness-based paradigm. Is consciousness fundamental? Neuroscientist and president of Maharishi International University, Dr. Tony Nader, worked directly with Maharishi for over 20 years to understand consciousness. In his book, Dr. Nader proposes that consciousness is all there is. He notes that the assumption that matter is primary has hit a roadblock since the 1990s. It is valid to ask then if consciousness may be primary. Models are not directly tested. Rather, the implications of the models are tested. So it is valid to adopt a new model and test its assumptions. This philosophy is in the category of monism, a monistic idealism where consciousness is all there is and there is nothing outside of consciousness. There is one grand field of consciousness which is completely non-physical and non-material. It is beyond time and space and therefore cannot be said to have a beginning or an end. Nader argues consciousness is not a product of the nervous system, a brain, a body, or anything. It is the fundamental reality. While the matter is primary had the hard problem of accounting for subjective experience, the consciousness is primary has a hard solution. How does the field of consciousness generate the world of physics and the reality we perceive as material? Physics today tells us that nature is concrete and localized on the surface, but built up of non-local fields and probability waves in the depths. The nature of consciousness functions in this same way. Because consciousness is all there is, objects do not exist independently. Rather, they are inextricably connected to the observed and process of observation. Our senses perceive multiplicity, but consciousness is singularity. Maharishi brought to light an understanding of this three-in-one structure of consciousness. The unified field of knowledge, or samhita in Sanskrit, manifests in what we perceive as the threefold nature of reality: the knower, process of knowing, and known, or rishi, devata, chandas in Sanskrit. Consciousness is the unity or coexistence of two qualities of intelligence that are contradictory at face value: the singularity of self-referral samhita and the diversity of rishi, devata, and chandas. Togetherness of these qualities renders consciousness wakeful, alert, and lively. The unified field of pure intelligence spontaneously gives rise to the diversity of all the laws of nature within itself, giving rise to the mechanics of creation and evolution. In this way, natural law leads to the particles and forces that make up the world. This knowledge of consciousness as fundamental was cognized by rishis, or knowers, of ancient India. Many thousands of years ago, these explorers of the inner world discovered that the human mind has the capacity to settle into a state of perfect stillness beyond all perceptions, thoughts, and feelings, while remaining perfectly alert and awake. Here, at the source of thought, the mind opens into an ocean of pure consciousness, a limitless sea of pure wakefulness. Rishis made these discoveries while in meditation. having learned their individual nervous systems could be refined to such a point that they could connect directly to this field of pure consciousness, the total potential of human consciousness. These rishis discovered this transcendental field lies beyond the boundaries of perception, thought, individuality, time, and space. Per Dr. Craig Pearson, quote, "In the innermost depth of the mind lies the fundamental reality of nature itself, the all-pervading field of unity from which the infinite diversity of the universe is born." In the 20th century, Maharishi worked to restore this wisdom and to enliven the potential of natural law within the physiology of everyone. He did so by teaching the technique of transcendental meditation, or TM. Maharishi referred to the field of pure consciousness as being, an immortal, abstract field that lies beyond the subtlest stratum of creation. TM was developed as a practical means to directly contact being, or the absolute. According to Maharishi, during TM, quote, "A proper thought is selected, and the technique of experiencing that thought in its infant state of development enables the conscious mind to arrive systematically at the source of thought, the field of being." End quote. The mind is like an ocean, and like an ocean, the surface layers are active in waves, while the deeper levels are silent. The surface of the ocean is said to be the conscious mind, where conscious thoughts are appreciated. Thoughts start from the deepest level of consciousness. Therefore, if we can consciously appreciate all the states of the bubble of thought prior to reaching the surface level, that would be the way to transcend thought and experience transcendental being. Through the repeated integration of TM with waking activity, the individual learns to transcend conscious thought and connect directly to the field of being. Maharishi and the rishis before him revitalized the Vedic understanding of reality. Vedic, pertaining to Veda, means knowledge, pure knowledge, complete knowledge. Veda is further defined as mantra and brahmana. Mantras are the structure of pure knowledge, or the sounds of Veda. Brahmanas are the internal dynamics of the structure of pure knowledge, the organizing power of the mantras, and the structuring dynamics of the mantras. Mantras and brahmanas together represent the structure and function of the Veda, or natural law, which embodies the system that organizes order and promotes the processes of creation and evolution. Veda is the structure and function of pure knowledge with infinite organizing power. Maharishi formulated complete theoretical and practical knowledge of Veda from analysis and synthesis of Vedic literature, as well as on the basis of the personal experience of higher states of consciousness from millions of people practicing TM around the world. From this unfoldment of the structure of Veda, Maharishi developed his Vedic Science, or MVS. MVS is the science of complete knowledge, the unified field of knower, knowing, and known. When we approach reality from a consciousness-based paradigm, we can explain the anomalous phenomena like unified field theory, quantum mechanics, the explanatory gap, and the meditation experience, including higher states of consciousness. I'll now explore these anomalies from the perspective of Maharishi Vedic Science. Anomalous phenomena according to Maharishi Vedic Science. Unified field theory. According to physicist Dr. John Hagelin, quote, "It was Einstein's deep conviction that the laws of nature had a simple, geometric, unified foundation, and that this unification could be understood by the human intellect. In an attempt to construct such a unified theory, he devoted the later part of his life to extending his geometric theory of gravity, known as general relativity, to include the electromagnetic force. Unfortunately, the theoretical tools and understanding needed to achieve such a unification were not yet available, and his quest for a unified field theory remained largely unfilled." End quote. Since Einstein's death, there have been several breakthroughs in the field of physics which have revitalized progress towards developing a unified field theory. These principles include, first, spontaneously broken symmetry, which locates deeply hidden symmetries of nature at fundamental space-time scales and explains the emergence of diverse fields from an initially unified field. Second, supersymmetry, capable of unifying force fields and matter fields in the context of a single field. Note that supersymmetry has not yet been verified by experimentation. Third, superstring theories, a framework for the unification of all the fundamental particles and forces in a quantum theory of gravity that is completely free of infinities. Fourth, loop quantum gravity, a theoretical framework for unifying general relativity with quantum physics. And fifth, holography, a framework for entanglement that recognizes the importance of wholeness in any complex system. The behavior of parts are actually organized by the whole, and subatomic particles are not independent things, but rather part of an indivisible system. The universe could more accurately be described as a quantum hologram through which everything could be considered part of the same continuum. What we perceive as different things at both the gross level of the senses and at the subatomic level of reality are really relatively independent subtotalities. The nature of consciousness that characterizes this field is self-referral consciousness, an abstract, unbounded field of consciousness which interacts with itself. From this viewpoint, the role of the human nervous system is to provide a physical structure of sufficiently integrated complexity to reflect, qualify, and individualize consciousness, providing the potential for individual experience. Physics describes the behavior of the unified field of natural law in terms of mathematics, while MBS gives you techniques to experience the nature of pure consciousness. Dr. Craig Pearson describes the qualitative correspondences of the unified field theory of modern science in the field of pure consciousness as described by the Vedic tradition, further supporting the argument that these are one and the same thing. These correspondences between the unified field and the field of pure consciousness include, first, a single underlying united field. Modern science describes all physical phenomena and the laws governing them as arising from a single underlying field, the superstring or unified field. MBS explains that all forms and phenomena in the universe arise from a single underlying field, the field of pure consciousness. Second, unbounded and beyond time and space. Modern science characterizes the unified field as non-localized and unbounded, with dynamics characterized by the Planck scale, or 10th to the negative 33 centimeters, beyond which space-time and causation break down. MVS explains that pure consciousness is non-localized, unbounded, transcendental, and beyond space and time. Third, pure intelligence. Modern science expects that since every law of nature reflects orderliness and intelligence, then its source, the unified field, must be nature's most concentrated field of intelligence. MVS similarly explains that because every thought reflects creativity and intelligence, the source of thought must be the most concentrated field of human intelligence. Fourth, infinitely dynamic. Modern science recognizes the unified field possesses virtually unlimited energy and dynamism. MBS describes pure consciousness as infinitely dynamic, eternally reverberating within itself at infinite frequency. And fifth, characterized by self-referral dynamics. Modern science recognizes the unified field as a completely closed system with self-interacting forces, giving rise to force and matter fields and particles. MBS describes pure consciousness as self-aware or self-referral, awake within its own nature, creating the infinite diversity of creation. The qualitative and quantitative overlap between the unified field of physics and the MBS field of pure consciousness support Dr. Hagelin's theory that consciousness is the unified field of all the laws of nature. We find further support for this idea when we consider the paradoxes of quantum mechanics from the perspective of MBS. Quantum mechanics. As noted earlier, the development of quantum mechanics resulted in several paradoxical discoveries that could be measured objectively but could not be subjectively explained. This includes entanglement, wave-particle duality, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and discontinuity of electrons. In Robert Oates Jr.'s book, Consciousness in the Quantum, The Next Paradigm, Oates describes a history of quantum mechanics and explains these phenomena in the context of MBS. In 1925 to 1926, physicists Erwin Schrödinger and Werner Heisenberg had foundational breakthroughs in quantum mechanics. These were Schrödinger's wave-based continuous theory and Heisenberg's particle-based discontinuous theory. Heisenberg had discovered that light absorbed and emitted by atoms could be precisely determined experimentally. Oates notes, quote, "In such a process, for example, a photon of light could transfer its energy to an electron in an atom, causing the electron to jump upwards to a higher orbit, a higher stable state of excitation. Then at some time later, the electron could release that excess energy, which would depart the atom as a new photon and, in the process, drop down to a lower stable state of excitation." Heisenberg simply accepted, as the basis of his logic and without explanation, discrete quantized energy states of the electron in an atom, as well as discontinuous quantum jumps between those states, rather than smooth and continuous evolution. This acceptance of discontinuity was one of the most contentious aspects of Heisenberg's new mechanics. Discontinuity became, in fact, one of the central issues of quantum interpretation. End quote. 6 months later, Schrödinger published a series of papers mathematically formalizing wave mechanics. As opposed to Heisenberg, Schrödinger's theory began from the other side of wave-particle duality, accepting the wave nature of both light and matter. Schrödinger's wave function described electrons as waves and qualitatively compared their behavior to that of a vibrating string. These discoveries presented a major problem for physicists ever since. How could electrons behave as both wave and particle at the same time? Oates contends that the wave nature of the electron has been verified in every experiment that has allowed for it, but that the particle nature has now been disproven. Rather, the particle understanding is simply a misinterpretation of the relative localization of quantum interactions. These experiments further support the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. Maharishi describes material particles as fluctuations or impulses, vritti, of consciousness. These frequencies appear first as sound and then transform into form as material particles. Thus, Maharishi describes the fluctuations as vibrations of consciousness. These frequencies, through their concatenations and congregations, give rise to the material structure and function of the human physiology, as well as to the material forms and phenomena of the universe. Although they give rise to everything in our apparently material universe, these waves are in fact unmanifest, existing in consciousness. Maharishi proposes, therefore, that the true nature of every self is pure self-referral consciousness. The knowledge MVS helps us to reconcile anomalous physics phenomenon according to the materialist paradigm, including unified field theory and the paradoxes of quantum mechanics. The latest breakthroughs in physics support a paradigm shift towards one based in consciousness. Similarly, we find the MVS approach to the explanatory gap further and higher states of consciousness further supports this paradigm shift. The explanatory gap. Just as the Vedic concept of pure consciousness helps us refine a unified field theory to explain phenomena including entanglement and wave-particle duality, so too can we understand anomalies like the explanatory gap and higher states of consciousness through Maharishi Vedic Science. Dr. Nader's hard solution to the hard problem of consciousness solves the anomaly of the explanatory gap by recognizing that consciousness leads to the appearance of objective reality. Our senses perceive multiplicity, but consciousness is singularity. Quantum physics demonstrates that our senses convey only a vague, illusory idea of reality. As Dr. Fred Travis, director for the Center of Brain, Consciousness, and Cognition and chair of the Department of Maharishi Vedic Science at MAU, describes in his book, Your Brain is a River, Not a Rock, we see not because our brain exists, but because our brain functions in a specific way. It's the non-material functioning of the material brain that is the seat of consciousness. There is no gap which needs to be explained. Consciousness is all there is. Higher states of consciousness. Furthermore, the materialist paradigm recognizes 3 states of consciousness latent within human physiology: sleep, dreaming, and waking state consciousness. However, according to MVS, there are in fact 7 states of consciousness, which include 4 higher states of consciousness. Each state of consciousness is accompanied by a unique set of physiological functioning. According to Maharishi, these higher states include transcendental consciousness, or TC. This 4th state can be achieved through the practice of transcendental meditation. In TC, attention has settled inward, beyond perceptions, thoughts, and feelings. What remains is the experience of pure consciousness awake to itself alone. Cosmic consciousness, or CC, the 5th state of consciousness. With the regular experience of TC, the mind and body become accustomed to functioning on the level of pure consciousness. One is therefore able to maintain the expanded state of unbounded awareness at all times, including during the waking, dreaming, and sleeping states. God consciousness, or GC. The sixth state involves the refinement of perceptual abilities as experienced during CC. One gains the ability to perceive finer, subtler strata of creation. And finally, unity consciousness, or UC. The seventh state of consciousness includes the ability to experience all things in terms of their innermost essence, the underlying oneness from which all creation emerges. The subject object relationship during transcendental experiences is characterized by the absence of time, space, and body sense, the framework that gives meaning to waking experiences. Physiologically, the experience of TC is marked by slow inhalation and with autonomic orientation at the onset of breath changes and heightened 8 to 10 hertz frontal coherence. Furthermore, when the individual achieves a state of CC, his or her physiology is marked by the coexistence of one electroencephalography with delta EEG during deep sleep and higher brain integration, greater emotional stability, and decreased anxiety during challenging tasks. As such, scientific research supports the theory that higher states of consciousness do exist, that they are physiologically unique, and that they cannot be accounted for by the materialist paradigm. The subjective accounts of a unified field of consciousness experienced through the Transcendental Meditation program are, quote, highly consistent across subjects and provide a principal ground for the proposed identity between pure consciousness and the unified field, end quote. Conclusion. The Copernican revolution kicked off the scientific enlightenment and revolutionized humanity's understanding of the cosmos. The scientific method established a practical, repeatable way to test hypotheses. Physicists, mathematicians, astronomers, and neuroscientists expanded the collective knowledge of humanity. Their effort gave rise to a paradigm of reality that dominates Western society today, characterized by materialism, reductionism, and determinism. However, as modern science explored deeper layers of reality, the materialist paradigm failed to answer many important discoveries. It could not explain if anything is energy and characterized as waves. Why do our senses perceive objects as fundamentally physical? How can entangled particles communicate faster than the speed of light? Why do humans experience reality through a subjective conscious experience if everything has been predestined since the Big Bang? How do we make sense of the vast numbers of individuals reporting higher states of consciousness during meditation? The consciousness-based paradigm of reality as brought to light by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi attempts to solve these questions. By recognizing that reality is not fundamentally physical, but rather fundamentally consciousness, we can flip these anomalous phenomena on their head. Over the past decades, researchers have built upon Maharishi's theory with hundreds of academic papers published in support of his ideas. This collective body of Maharishi Vedic Science has profound implications in the capability to present a paradigm shift in our understanding of reality. French novelist Victor Hugo proposed that all the forces in the world are not so powerful as an idea whose time has come. The time has come for modern science to shake off the shackles of the materialist, reductionist paradigm and recognize the dawning of a new scientific enlightenment. By recognizing that our cosmos and human physiology are fundamentally consciousness, we can unlock a new era of theoretical and applied science that advances humanity to new heights.